Well, hey, everybody. We're real blessed today to have Jim Burns here today to talk with us a little bit about parenting, talking proactive parenting with your kids. I've read a lot of his stuff. Nikki and I have personally been blessed by it, and our kids are the better for it, I'll tell you that. And so let me let him introduce himself. Jim, thanks for being here. And if you can just share a little bit about who you are and what you do, that'd be great.
You got it. Great to be with you, Jim, honestly. And I love what you're doing and how you're, well, what you're doing at your church. I mean, it's neat. I was just there, by the way, last week. I was in Denver and it was beautiful. It was warm
Yeah.
and then I could see snow. And then, a couple days later, I heard it was cold. So that's what I
Hmm.
love about Colorado is like, you never know what
Yeah.
it's going to be like. Here in Southern California, it's kind of like same old, same old. I'm
Mhm.
not whining about that in the winter. But anyway, well, I am married to Cathy, and we got married 1 week after college graduation, which I don't suggest to people, but we just thought we were ready to go. And 10 years later, Christy came into our life, and then Rebecca, and then Heidi. So we actually have three daughters. So we don't know anything about hormones and drama. And oh yeah, we do. And they're great. They're awesome. Today is we're doing this is my daughter Heidi's birthday, and so I wrote her really really early, and she has two kids, but she had already figured out how to go to Pilates early in the morning, and she had a big day planned. And we came from dysfunctional families, so Cathy and I didn't. We had no mentors, if you would. Our parents were okay. I mean, I'm not saying they were terrible, rotten people. My dad was an alcoholic, but he was what we call a functioning alcoholic. So I didn't feel a lot of that stuff. Cathy's family was a little, unique, but again, she didn't. It's not like we've been on a psychiatrist couch talking about this stuff. We just learned that we were either going to recover or repeat. The Bible says that you inherit the sins of a previous generation to the third and
Mhm.
fourth generation. And we saw ourselves that first year doing that. We got married, we went on a honeymoon. I came back and was a youth pastor at a church called Yorba Friends here in Southern California. And we would argue on the way to church, and then we would talk to the kids about the joy of a Christian family, feeling a little bit hypocritical, right?
Sure.
So we put a stake in the ground because it wasn't going that well, and said we're gonna be the transitional generation. And I would say it's one of the best decisions Cathy and I ever made. One of the hardest, by the way, but to
Hmm.
recover or repeat. And I watched her family and I watched my family basically repeat a lot of that stuff. And with us, because of our commitment to Christ, because of our commitment to really work on our marriage and our parenting, we feel like we've changed the trajectory of generation to generation. I mean, it's kind of cool. I've got grandkids now, of course, and
Hmm.
like my 9-year-old. I mean, we've read through the Bible 3 times.
Wow.
I didn't do that with my kids. I mean, we read Chronicles and Narnia. We prayed. We looked good on paper,
Right.
but we're so much more intense about it now, and part of that is because we have such a better understanding of culture and all that goes on than we did, of course, when we got married.
Hmm.
But no, that's kind of us. I'm the president of HomeWord. I just said I'm the president of HomeWord, and a month ago we had a
Yeah.
new president. So
Yeah.
I am now the founder of HomeWord. I've been kicked over and actually thrilled to do it because I do content, and that's what I'm about: writing content, speaking. And so now we have an amazing man who is our president, and so I look forward to him being my boss, actually already. And so HomeWord has four values: strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. So everything we do at HomeWord goes through that. So we've got, as you mentioned, we have books, we have courses, and people use it humbly all over the world. And then I've got a podcast called, which is we're in the podcast studio today, called HomeWord with Jim Burns, and I love doing that. I get to interview some of the finest Christian family experts, and I'm taking notes on it when I meet with
Yeah.
these people. So it's really really cool. So that's kind of me.
Hey, will you share a little bit if you don't mind, and either from your story or just a word to parents, because I'm sure there's a lot of other people that are in that spot of, I forget how you said it, to
Recover or
change,
repeat. Sure.
recover or repeat. There you go.
Right. Right.
There's probably people doing that, and I'm sure it's not just as easy as a one conscious decision to just say, I'm just going to
No.
start doing
No.
this
No.
now.
No.
Can you mind fleshing that out a bit?
Sure. 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 For Cathy and I, when we said, okay, if we're not going to repeat and we're going to recover, how do we do this? Okay. So for us, we started really proactively going after mentors. And so, and if you'd go up to somebody at our church, say, and I said, "Would you be our parenting mentor?" Nobody thinks they're that good at parents, and nobody thinks they're that good in marriage. So we just started saying, "Hey, could we go out to dinner with you?" And we have like 5 questions we want to ask
Hmm.
about. You guys seem to be doing such a good job with parents. So I'm thinking of Jim and Manya, Russian immigrants, but amazing Christian leaders.
Hmm.
And for I don't know, 35 years, we would do that.
Wow.
They never said we're Jim and Cathy's mentors, but
Hmm.
they truly were. And so sometimes, remember the bracelets we used to wear, the "What would Jesus do?"
Yeah.
WWJD. Well, we kind of did what would Jim and Manya do in this
Mhm.
case, because they had 3 kids. Their kids were thriving. Were they perfect? No, they had some bumps along the road too. But there's so many nuggets, if you would, that we got from them because we were willing to be authentic and say, you know what, it's chaotic right now in our house. I mean, we had, kids, 2 kids in diapers, almost 3 at one time. And, uh, and we were like, it's going nuts. And they just laughed. They didn't even give us great advice. They just go, oh yeah, this is a season.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful. So the mentor thing was really good. And then frankly, we had to, we I had another mentor. His name is Neil Clark Warren. He actually is the founder of eharmony.com. What people
Okay.
didn't know was that he taught in a theological seminary on marriage. He brilliant, wonderful Christian guy. A lot of people didn't know that because they just knew him as the golden hair, white hair of eHarmony. One day he said to me, I was helping him out I think I was doing some consulting for them, and he said, Jim, communication is a learned trait, because I was kind of bagging on Cathy and me imitating how our parents did it. And he said, you can learn how to communicate in a different way. And that was an aha for me, because I went, if Cathy and I lean into this, we can actually, get the help we need. And so many of my mentors are people who I met after they died. I know that sounds weird, but they're called books. And
Ah.
so, I'm reading books of people that help me. I mean, theologically, C.S. Lewis. I mean, obviously, I did my PhD work in England, so I actually went to Oxford and saw his seat at this pub that he hung out with, I guess, and wrote some things. But, I didn't know him, but he helped me when it came to marriage and parenting. Some of I mean, I felt like I knew these people because I was listening. Today, you have podcasts and you have all the things like at HomeWord that we provide. Now we can mentor people from afar.
Right.
It's not as good as face to face. Jim and Manya, they'll always be our top mentors, because
Sure.
literally I know that Manya makes the best fish tacos known to humankind because we were sitting in her house. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't beat that. But at the same time, when we started thinking, I know you're going to ask me a question in a bit because we've talked about this about discipline
Yeah.
and things like that. Well, I learned that from a guy who's in Colorado that I've never met, but I loved his book, Love and Logic, and a lot of people have read the book
Mhm.
Love and Logic, and so his name's Foster Klein. And I go, the guy's kind of a mentor, but again, I don't
Yeah.
know much about him. I just know that book Cathy and I read together, and it helped us get on the same page when we weren't really on the same page when it came to discipline and responsibility stuff.
Hmm.
Yay. So you can find it so
Yeah.
many ways. So it's a longer answer, I realize, to your
Sure.
question, but I think people need to hear that invite people into your life
Yeah.
to help you work through this. And even I've been in a small group for 22 years. And so I'm a better husband and a better father because I've been with
Sure.
these men for 22 years. I was just with them yesterday. And, sometimes that's, we talk about, sports and politics, but we always
Mhm.
do a Bible study. And these men are older than me, and I've watched these men raise their kids, do their marriages through ups and downs. And again, I'm so blessed to be in a group like that, but to do that, you got to kind of open up the kimono and say, so it's not perfect. And
Right.
especially those of us in ministry, we feel sometimes like it's hard to find somebody like that, or it's hard to do that.
Hmm.
And so I think that, when we're authentic with anybody, and so, the parents who are, watching this, my goodness, find people who can help you through it, and don't expect them to be perfect in every angle. Jim, his name is Jim Slevko. He's now passed on, but he was my mentor. But he thought he had a lot of stuff he had a lot of thoughts on family ministry. Half of them I didn't like. He had great things as a dad and as a husband, but his input on some of the family, he would come up with some of the silliest ideas. He goes, "Hey, I got an idea for your ministry," and I'd kind of listen to it and kind of go, "Okay, thank you," but no. So they're not
Yeah.
mentors in every aspect of our life.
So you bring up something interesting. You talk about authenticity that's
Yep.
adults with adults. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
When you think about like being authentic with your kids, I
Yeah.
realize there's one element that is, if my wife and I are in a disagreement and you air everything in front of the children at certain
Right.
ages, that can be unhealthy. At the
Right.
same time, if they think, well, my mom and dad never had any problems, then they grow
Right.
up, they get married, and they have a problem and go, what's wrong with everything?
Right.
Um, do you have any input on that? Just about how
Yeah.
do you be authentic with your children
No,
appropriately?
no, I think you do it, you kind of personally tailor the drama.
Hmm.
And what I mean by personally tailor, hey, can you take a look at this? Right there. There's something that just came up on the screen. I don't know if you saw that. Something came up on our thing, and I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Um, Somebody may have to cut this. But I think it's personally tailored. Like, I think you're right, Jim, that we don't do all of our airing of conflict in front of our kids. They could get PTSD
Hmm.
depending on how people do
Yeah.
conflict. But I think it's important that if they saw some conflict happen and you say, you know what, we're going to be right back. We need to have a conversation. You go into the room, you kind of deal with it. I think it's important that you come back and say, hey, so we had this issue and here's how we resolved it. Because again, we need to teach our kids how to do that.
Hmm.
Now, authenticity is more than just though the argument between the husband and the wife or
Sure.
whatever. I think authenticity is when Christy, my oldest, was 12. We were suffering for Jesus. I was writing my PhD dissertation. We were suffering in Maui of all places,
Oh no.
and I couldn't do sixth grade math. I'm getting a PhD, but I'm like, no, go ask your mom that question because I had no idea. And Christy said something really smart to me, really smart alecky. And I had pressure under me. My dissertation wasn't going as well and whatnot. And I blew up, and I'm not a blow up guy. My dad was a rage person, so I'm the exact opposite. I stuff. I mean, I got all kinds of problems, so I stuff. I do all this, but I don't rage usually. And I went, Christy, blah blah, and I just, I looked for help at Cathy, and she just looked at me like, what is wrong with you? So I wasn't going to get any help from her. So I walked out the door, came back, went directly to Christy's bedroom, and I said, Christy, she was on her bed because I put her in her room. And I said, Christy, I am so sorry. That was all about you. And that was not about, I mean, that was all about me. So I
Right.
said that wrong.
I
That was
got
all
it.
about me and not about you. And I said, would you forgive me? And little, 12-year-old, who'd just been blasted by her dad,
Hmm.
um, puts her arms around me. And she was kind of wrong too. But again, I needed to be the authentic one.
Right.
And she put her arms around me and she said, Daddy, I forgive you and I love you. And, that's
Wow.
that was what it was. So I received grace from my daughter.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that if I wouldn't have said that, I wouldn't have become a safe person to her. So
Yeah.
when she had a problem, so she's 17, she's filled with hormones and drama. And she did something. And I said, hey, Christy, right now I'm going to ask you to go to your room. Because she had was hassling Cathy about something. It wasn't even about me. And I went up there and she was on her bed, same thing. She was on her bed. She comes up and she goes, Daddy, I am so sorry. That was all about me. And I just got a lot of stuff going on and
There you go.
college coming up and all this. And that was not about mom. And I'm
Good for
sorry.
you.
Will you forgive me? And I'll go ask mom to forgive me. And I gave her a hug and I said, I'm so kind of proud of you. And then I said, do you remember another time? She goes, yeah, when I was 12 and you yelled at me.
In Maui, I remember
But
that.
the point being, as parents, even when we think about things like, discipline, and discipline means, the root word, as you well know, your pastor, is discipleship.
Hmm.
So we're discipling them, and we disciple through authenticity. We don't disciple just through words. It's an experiential relationship. Discipleship is what I call a character building relationship that takes what I've been learning and I pass it on to whoever, but I
Yeah.
pass it on to my kids. So the authenticity factor, I think we've downplayed. And again, kids, both Gen Z, which a lot of the parents at your church have kids, or millennials who are a little bit older now, but they crave authenticity. So even the churches that they come to, if a pastor is being willing to be authentic, our pastor is really authentic. These people are, coming because they hear him say, "I don't have it all together," and
Hmm.
then he opens up the Word and does a great job,
Yeah.
right? But that's what we have to do as parents,
Hmm.
and we a lot of us didn't have that modeled with our own parents. So
Hmm.
again, it goes back to that recover, repeat. So we've got to figure out how to do this by watching conversations like this, as
Yeah.
opposed to going, well, I'm not going to imitate my dad. I don't think my dad ever said he was sorry to me. I
Oh,
mean,
really?
he's not a bad guy. He was from another, era that didn't, the dad especially didn't ever. I don't know that my mom did. I mean, they just didn't do that. And I don't think you have to,
Yeah.
go, I'm
And I
sorry,
love,
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But
no, you're,
the
yeah.
authentic is key.
For sure. And I love how you're saying that too, that there's moments where you step in and do something, but then there's the relationship over time, there's
Yeah.
the consistency over time. I've had times with my kids where I've had to tell them, no, stop that like quick, and I didn't have time to explain myself, and they're in high school now and they'll stop.
Yeah.
And I had a dad ask like, how did you get him to do that? And I thought, I don't know, but I think I've just spent
Yeah.
16, 17 years of just like, so they know the balance of who I am and how
Yeah.
I love them in the relationship. So when I say something, they weigh it against
Well,
all these different years. And I kind of think, and I want to talk discipline. I think that there's something there too that, dads especially are probably maybe the bigger culprits of like not fostering as deep of a relationship and then just
right.
coming in with the heavy-handed discipline because
Right.
dad can do
Right.
that.
Yeah. And
So I'm just curious.
that's what their dads did probably too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there maybe is a bit of a repeat thing. I'm
Yeah.
really curious to hear your thoughts, especially like even starting from a very young age. We got
Mhm.
parents that are going, I remember that age of just going,
Oh,
I
yeah.
just need the behavior to stop right now, or I'm going to lose
Right.
my mind. And
Exactly.
so I may not discipline wisely, but I'm going to get this behavior to stop, darn it. And then,
Exactly.
but that's not necessarily
Exactly.
a long-term perspective. So,
No, well, it's not a good long term. I mean, we say at HomeWord that the bottom line in parenting for even young kids is that you help them become responsible adults. So a lot of times we're just trying to get them to be obedient, like stop this behavior. And sometimes,
mhm,
and you can stop, you can scream at them and you can do different things and they'll stop eventually. That doesn't mean that you help them long term. So really, when you think about discipline, you have to go, you're moving them from dependence on you toward independence. And one of the reasons why a lot of adult children have a failure to launch is because literally they didn't learn how to become independent. So I
mhm,
think you foster discipline by helping even with littler kids. Experience is a better teacher than advice. So yeah, we got to give them advice, and sure, we're in charge, especially when they're younger. But literally, the bottom line is to sometimes that experience. I mean, I learned from
mhm,
being silly with my experiences. I mean, that's how I've always learned that way. Well, I guess I
mhm,
won't do that again.
mhm,
And I think we have to think about that with our kids. And so we have to give them responsibility even when we're not sure they're ready for some of that kind of responsibility. I'm not saying that you give your 5-year-old responsibility and say, "Hey, look at mom and I are going away. There's some peanut butter in the cabinet.
Here's the car
live
keys.
out." Yeah, no, no, of course not. But I am saying that as time goes on, you build, more. You help them become more responsible,
Mhm,
and then like the illustration you gave, Jim, about your teenagers. You built a foundation
mhm,
of respect and authority and love. And so they're going to obey you with most of the time, some of the time, most of the time, we'll say, they're going to obey you partly because you built that foundation. But if
mhm.
you're like being the best friend to your kids, well, then
Right.
they're not going to really respect you. And a lot of younger parents have this deal. How do am I their best friend or am I their parent? Well, you can be a parent and still be loving. You don't have to, we
Mhm,
always say, well, if you're not friends, they don't even want you to be a friend. You're too old for them. I mean, every parent, the parents you're talking about, those young parents, they're young. I look at them and go, wow, they're young. Their
mhm.
kids are going, they're old.
Yep.
So we can't be their friend. We have to have authority. And in having authority, that just doesn't mean you don't have to do it by hitting, biting, screaming, putting them in a room. I mean, all those things work for obedience, but they're terrible
Right.
for the long haul. So
Do
it's
you, do you
really,
have something? Do you have something specific, like talking about disciplining with a young child? So
yeah,
picture the mom or dad that's there, the kid's going crazy. They're
yeah,
going, I'm at the end of my rope. I
right,
need
right.
this behavior to stop.
Well, a couple of things. Let me be not as specific, and then let me go specific. Number
Great.
one is we have to get the monkey off our back. And sometimes when we raise our kids, because we're raising them to be responsible adults, then we have to actually give them the opportunity to sometimes even fail. And I'm talking about even younger kids. Of course, I'm not teens, definitely. I mean, where you're at, but even with younger kids, we have to well, there's an African proverb that says, he who is carried on another man's back does not appreciate how far the town is. So
Hmm.
we have these helicopter parents still. And, the word helicopter parent's been around since 1989, first time we ever heard that word. So we have parents who are kind of taking care of their kids to a point that they don't let them. have pain, or they don't let them fail. They do their homework.
Right.
They're 7 years old and yeah, they got an A on their math because they did the homework instead of, the parents.
Yeah.
Because again, it's going to take us 2 hours to, fight through our kids, or we can just do it in like 10 minutes and then we're good. We're done. So we do that kind of stuff. Right. Or screens, instead of creating a media safe home, and really work through some of the boundaries and what like that, we give up and we let them self-soothe on their screen. So, anyway, so get the monkey off of your back and let them, take on some of the responsibility at whatever age. Secondly is united we stand, divided we fall. So this is where no parent parents the same way. I mean, no couple. And so, but that's why I suggest that people read books. Like I mentioned a book, Jim Foster Klein and book on
Love and Logic.
Love and Logic, which is they're in your area, Denver area, and for Cathy and I, that was an aha book for us because we kind of, instead of me disagreeing with how Cathy was parenting and Cathy disagreeing with how I was parenting, we now came together and we said, we're going to kind of try this. Somebody just wrote me, I have a book called Confident Parenting, and they just said, so we're living by confident parenting. And that kind of scared me because I don't think it's a strategy book on parenting, but it's also, I just wrote that. I've probably changed my mind since I wrote it on a couple things. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But again, I think that helps a lot. And I think we have to make sure that as parents, we lead with love, purpose, and authority. So when it comes to discipline and some of the practical sides, words that come to my mind when a kid is, and this could be younger kids or older, they're all upset, and you go, I feel your pain. And if I was your age, I might feel the same way. Well, now you're identifying with them. But then there's a word. I can't remember if it's 3 words or 1 word, but it's called nevertheless. Nevertheless, here's what we're going to do. So now what you're doing is you're building authority. I feel your pain. I get it. When I was your age, might have felt the same way. Nevertheless, here's how we're going to do this. Now you're showing authority without screaming, shouting, or whatever. And sometimes they'll go, well, life isn't fair. I mean, that's not fair. And you kind of have to say, well, you're right. Life's not fair. But what are you doing? You're now parenting them to become responsible adults as opposed to just getting through, Thursday. Right. So what I like to do is call it creating character without crushing their spirit. To me, that's better. So our job with discipline is to create character. And so this is kind of a combo of me and others. In fact, Foster Klein probably has something like this too. Step 1 is you give your child responsibility. Now, again, it has to be age appropriate. So the responsibility you give to a 4-year-old is very different than you give to a 14-year-old. But you give them responsibility and you trust that your child's going to do it. It could be something about putting toys away. It could be something about a curfew, whatever it might be. Don't hit your sister, whatever. Then you trust that they're going to carry it out when they blow it, because it's not if they blow it, they're going to blow it. They're a sinner married another sinner, and you had sinnerlings. So, they're going to mess up at times. So when they blow it, you actually give them the same responsibility again, but there's a consequence for that. So it's better, not always perfect, but it's better when you give them the consequence before. So if you don't take your toys away, then that means that you lose this. And it has to be something that they actually, some kids, like, will put you in your room and you'll be on a timeout. And like, I've got one grandkid who's like, awesome, that's exactly where I want to be. And that's what I want to do. Right. Yeah. So that's not a consequence. That's like a gift. So you figure out what it is. And again, tougher consequence for the older kids than for the younger kids, but there is. But then you turn around and you give them that back. You give them the same responsibility, because how else are they going to learn? So you go, you know what? I trust that you can do this. However, if we do it again, now we'll move up to screen time. They're on their screen. You'd set a limit and they're on it too long and they got caught. Then you say, okay, then it means the second time, it means we take your screen away for 2 days. And they go, well, yeah, but I've got homework and I've got this and that. I know, and we're really sorry. So it has to kind of hurt. Or soccer practice. Well, now they want to go to soccer practice, and now it's for the whole team. Even the coach is saying, please, Junior needs to come to soccer practice. They're our best player. And you're going, sorry, we're on a timeout. So I think that idea, is a much better thing. And then I would add one more thing in terms of setting some boundaries. See, kids, I worked for years. I worked in the area of trying to kids who were like on drugs or whatever, and we'd do assessments. And what was fascinating was they never had contracts, and contract is a form of boundaries. And so a family contract, what's the expectation here? And again, I'm not trying to make this too formal. A contract sounds like a
Right.
attorney, but what's the expectation? How are we going to keep you accountable to this? Which is what I was talking about with the responsibility.
Mm.
What are some of the positive consequences if you do well? And not just positive consequences like we're going to, give you a day out of school and we're going to go, snowboarding if they're older. It's sometimes the positive consequences are, if you get your homework done, then I know you have a desire to go to University of Colorado in Boulder, and you'll get to go. But if you don't do it, then you're going to have to you're not going to make it there. At the same time, also some positive consequences that, we're going to celebrate A's and we're going to celebrate this. If they're negative consequences, it's like, well, you're going to have to pay more for your insurance because you don't get good driver's insurance. Again, I'm kind of moving to
Right.
the teenage thing. And so that's a negative consequence. And the other negative consequence is here's what we're going to take away from you until you can kind of bounce back up. We believe you can bounce back up, but it's just you were just being a flake. And you know what? I was a flake when I was in high school, so I did some of the same things. Now here's what we're going to do. So
Mhm.
now you're playing that positive consequence, whatever. And let me go through one more thing.
Yeah.
Because I think I noticed you had a couple of questions that you'd kind of thrown out, and what I like to say is if you're going to deal with discipline. And so again, discipline isn't just punishment. It's seldom. I mean, it's not just you're not even doing it to punish. You're doing it with consequences. If somebody at work doesn't get their job done, they don't like go, oh, you're going to be on timeout. I mean, they might eventually say you're going to be fired, but there have to be some things. So I think you create. I have 5 questions that I like to ask. So what is the issue? And let's say the issue is lack of discipline with homework, because that's from a young age to older.
Right.
So that's the issue. Number 2, what is a reasonable expectation with your homework? I mean, so that's a good conversation. You're teaching them, what is that? It's the ideal response would be to complete it in a timely manner. But, your 5-year-olds, well, not 5-year-old because they don't really have homework, but, a 7, 8, 9, they start learning this. Third question is, how can we hold you accountable? And so instead of doing the homework for them, how do we hold you accountable? So there's a daily homework check-in, but it doesn't take too many families. They spend the entire evening mad at each other because the homework's not getting done. And, everybody's yelling at each other and the kids are sneaking screen time if they get a little older and, all this. That's not a good thing. So, you're talking about what are rewards for a job well done with this? And it kind of goes to what I was saying. Some of the rewards they begin to understand even at a pretty young age that, yeah, if you do well, this is what's going to happen. But, I don't think you bribe them at everything. Like, yeah, if you go, we'll go on a trip to Disney World. It's more just the natural consequences that are good when you do that. And then also some, hey, we're going to take you out to your favorite meal. We're going to celebrate you. Okay. Then what are the consequences if you don't meet those expectations? See? And so, and it's the same kind of thing. So what I'm saying, and if I could imagine as we're talking, people could be writing this kind of stuff down because literally that becomes a part of as parents. We were talking about, how do parents do this united? Well, now that becomes a part of your parenting job description. So, it's not like you need to go, okay, now point 2 is this. It just becomes a natural part of what you do with your kids, remembering that age development is very different with a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old. So it's just very, very different. So we have to then adapt to wherever those kids are. So anyway.
And I think the fear by a parent, perhaps even just an unspoken fear, is if I discipline my children, they will inherently they are destined to start hiding things from me.
Yeah.
And it will necessarily ruin our relationship.
Right.
Whereas if I buddy with them and maybe don't call the bad things or doing bad things, then we're buddies and our relationship is intact. I'm curious if you could speak to that. It seems like very faulty logic to me, and I think you were getting at that a little bit.
No, I think it is, and it's hard because I want to be liked by my kids, and I was that person. That's why Cathy and I needed that book I was telling you about, because I was the one that I wanted my girls to adore me, to walk into the room and go, "Dad, you are amazing, and thank you so much for all you're doing for me, not letting me do my homework or letting this, all these kind of things." I mean, and that was wrong. So what I had to learn was that they still will like and respect me, but I still needed to be the person of authority. I have an interesting thing with my daughter Heidi, who again, it's her birthday today, and I connected with her and I posted stuff and all kinds of things on her already. I adore this kid. She's 36, by the way, but she was in my office a while ago at HomeWord. Oh, around Christmas. She was last Christmas. She was scanning. She needed to scan, and I didn't know how to scan in our at our house. We have it, but I didn't know how to do it. So she comes in and she sees a sign that I have in my office that says, every child needs at least one person who is irrationally positive about them. And I actually got that when I was the area director for Young Life when I was going to Princeton in the 1970s. And I've just kept it. And Heidi looks at that and she goes, Dad, it's all yellowed. I mean, I don't know why it's even up there still. And she goes, Dad, you're that person for me. What she didn't see was my eyes kind of welled up with tears. Well, but she also said, I mean, you kept the boundaries pretty strong and pretty firm.
Yeah.
And she said, I love this, that she was 35 then. She goes, yeah, you didn't let us go to movies that other people could go to. And, all these kind of things. I laughed because she was telling me she was bugged at me still for, whatever that was as a teen. But she goes, but you're that person for me. And I went, okay, I can die and go to heaven right now because she understood that.
That's awesome.
So I think it's possible to have authority and not, and not have them hate you.
Yeah.
When you become buddy, you're not going to help them become responsible adults because now they're a peer or they're leading it. I mean, I was just talking with a woman. I was speaking at Chick-fil-A's big marriage event last weekend. And I was talking to somebody and I said, it sounds like your 17-year-old is more your friend than your daughter. And so she's acting like she doesn't respect you, probably because you're not a person that they can respect if you're letting her get by with this. I mean, they were doing some weird stuff with overnight things and just, they were so upset that their daughter was violating their values and straying from faith, but they hadn't held the ground. The kid still lives in the house. See? So, I think it's really possible. It's hard. I was talking to a single mom last week also who was like, hey, this is harder for me because, my husband hates me or my ex-husband hates me. And, I lost him and I lost his family. So, if again, it was a daughter, there are sons in the world. But if my daughter started to dislike me, we're talking about screens, because I was going to say, we were talking about most parents allow too much on screen stuff.
Yep.
I think personally.
Yep.
But I mean, that's how they do homework. That's how this generation is going to get married in terms of meet people online. It's how they work, so it's not like we can take the screens away. Right. But the point I'm saying is you got to have some boundaries. And I said, don't expect your daughter to go, thank you, Mom. This is a great idea that we're not going to now have, the screens at dinner because she's always on her screen at dinner. I said, I'd move that. That would be for all of you. Take those screens, put them in a box during dinner and communicate. That seems pretty simple. But for her, she goes, but she's going to balk. Of course she's going to balk. Sorry. Yeah. But be the parent.
Yes.
And so I think that's important for this. So we can't look at them as friends. You know what's funny is, though, Cathy and I both talk about this now because of our 3 daughters who are in their 30s. They're our friends almost now. What has happened is we've moved to mentors in their life. And so again, we're still not their friends. We didn't get invited to the party that's happening tonight at my daughter Christy's down the road. And that's because it's a party for all of their friends.
Yeah.
And sometimes we actually do get invited. I mean, we always get invited to the birthday parties and things like that.
Sure.
So, we just have to get over it. We need to have friends of our own.
Yeah. Well, we found that, like, especially when they're younger and you talk about a boundary, they don't really have a concept. We tried to be consistent over the years to set boundaries. And then once they get to high school, our kids rarely bring up all my friends have this and all my friends get to do this, because we always, first of all, go, all your friends, every single one of your friends gets to do this. Why don't we call some of them, see what they say? But it seems to me the consistency over the years is a key thing. And then we also, one of the questions that came up from some of our parents was, dad parents one way, mom parents another way, strict and loose, or loose and strict and loose, or whatever it is. How do you navigate that?
Well, I think it goes back to the united part. I think you have to navigate that. And some people, it can come naturally. For Cathy and I, sort of came more natural because I really have a lot of respect for Cathy as a mom. So there were things that I didn't agree with her on some of the education stuff, and I didn't agree with her on some of the discipline stuff. But I went, it's kind of working. So I honestly agreed to disagree. And And I tried my best to do what she was doing, or vice versa. Sometimes I think you need a moderator, and that's where sometimes a counselor, just it's like a quick counselor. You could use Sometimes you can use a pastor, you can even use a friend. But if it's too harsh, I think you bring in a counselor who knows how to do that.
Mhm.
So I moderated yesterday on Zoom in
Oh,
this
really?
room here in our deal. I moderated a couple who didn't have the same agreement on their adult children. Okay. And so I was trying to get them at least on board about 80% of it, because there were some issues that was causing conflict in their marriage. And so I said, well, what can we agree on here? And I sat at this very table and I wrote down all the things that they could agree on. Gosh, it was pretty good. Now, what do you absolutely disagree with? There were like two or three things. And I said I said to one of the guys, said his name, I said, can you live with what your wife is suggesting? And he goes, well, I don't think it's the best idea. He was much more the strong, firm, whatever. And she was much more doing this by love. And in that context, I actually thought her love and grace thing was going to probably be better. I mean, these are adult kids. It's not like you can go, we're putting you on a timeout.
Right.
So he came around to, I said, so what you're telling me is you can agree with what she's saying on a specific subject. And even though you don't agree with her, you can agree to come together and be kind of united on that one. Okay. So I think we had two things that we left on the table that I don't think we even talked about because it was like not going to help. So in a way, I think we need to find all the things we have in common.
Right.
And then I had to learn to assume certain responsibility. Like Cathy's going, wait, you're messing it up for me. Like, you're messing around with them. And I've just, laid down the hammer on some stuff that they did.
Mhm.
And you're not saying mom's wrong. You're just kind of like being fun dad, Disneyland dad. So you need to just stop that.
Yeah.
And her
Yeah.
background, she has a background in early childhood development. All this, I mean, she's a lot better at it than me. And I had to respect her.
Huh.
And actually, I had to swallow my pride, because I had to realize there's certain things that, even though I didn't always agree with the way my wife did it, I thought she could be too detailed or too negative or whatever. I had to go with her. And to do that, I had to kind of swallow my pride because it was working.
Yeah.
Now, my kids say, we are parenting. Two of my kids have children. One they just have gotten married, and but two of them kind of parent the way we parented, which cracks me up, because they thought we were way too conservative, especially on screens and
Yeah.
on going to movies, and they're like, seriously, Dad. Every kid at the Christian school, our kids went to Christian
Yeah.
school through eighth grade. At the Christian school, can see this movie, and you're telling us we can't.
Yeah.
The pastor's daughter got to see this movie,
Yeah.
and we weren't super prudish. It was just,
Yeah.
well, our thing was, we'll go with you to that movie, but and we'll talk about it, but you're not going with your friends at this point. And again, that obviously changed, and they're healthy. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Kind of works.
well, those are the hardest ones because the parenting happens in the moment, and some of it's for
Right.
the moment, but so much of it is one day. I mean, how many times have we looked back and went, "Oh, my parents were right," or the old people
Yeah.
at my church were right? They may
Right.
see that one day and go, "I'm going to actually, I believe it so much,
No,
I'm going to parent my kids a lot
no,
that way."
Jim, at the age of your kids, they're not going to go like, you guys are the most awesome,
Yeah.
decision makers on everything. As they get older, because you used a word earlier, consistency,
Mhm.
consistent discipline, consistent see in that, they're going to look back and go, I now call you blessed. But again, it's when it'll never happen until they have
Yeah.
kids. So
Yeah.
like my kids are all like, oh my gosh, did you stay up at night? And like my daughter Heidi said this. Her little son came over and goes, "Mom," and then barfed on him, on her. And I go, "Oh, I remember the day. Actually, it got in my eyes because you came up to me in the bed, Daddy. I don't think I feel good." That, well, they begin to appreciate you in a whole different way. So,
Totally.
but that's not your time. It's my time. I'm loving that right now. Or I even
Oh,
love it
yeah.
when the older grandson, we go to the same church, and so they're all looking for him. They can't find him. I go, I know where he is. He goes, he's climbed the tree. So really, you don't want to climb the tree at our church, but we have this tree, and he and some boy were at the top of this tree, just talking and having a great grand old time. And I said to Christy, she's like, I can't believe he did this. I go, I remember a time when you and Lauren were
Yep.
I caught you on the top of our roof, and you could have like slid down it. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, but he can't be up in that tree. And it's the kind of thing where I get in the car and I say to Cathy, ah, loved that James was up in the tree. Now, again, I don't think he should be. He could fall and break his arm.
Right, right,
And that's, I can imagine what our church people, staff would think.
right. That's
But the point being, it comes back around.
Yeah. So let me give you a scenario here. As far as parents getting on the same page, I'm picturing two scenarios. I'll give you a Colorado example. We have a family that the dad will let the kids go a little crazy on the slopes. If they get
Yeah.
hurt, they get hurt. They'll learn. Mom is a little more like
Yeah.
put things on them and let's get them
Yeah.
down the deal.
Great illustration.
And there's a lot of tension around that.
Right.
And then the other one is they have like they're having a lot of tension about letting them have screens behind doors.
Yeah.
To me, I look and go, a kid could get hurt. They could get seriously hurt on the ski slope. I've watched them. I don't think it's going to be anything serious. The dad's an amazing skier. He's right there with them. Screens behind closed doors feels like it could go really far, really fast, and seems
Right.
like a pretty good firm boundary kind of
Yeah.
thing to set.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious because if there's parents out there that are going, we have tension about stuff, I wonder
Yes.
how much of it is tension about things that don't matter as much, but
Yeah.
we've elevated them in our minds. So I'm just
Sure.
kind of curious
Sure.
which things
No.
you'd throw into which
No,
buckets, if that
no,
makes
great
sense.
illustration. And actually both of those illustrations are perfect illustrations because I whether we like it or not, we are going to look at those things differently. And if it's what I say to couples is if it's affecting your relationship with each other, then the Bible is very clear. Where there's no counsel, the people fall in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. So you may need to come to a negotiation part. I'd be the dad that would say, have fun out there on the ski slope, be safe, and whatever. And my wife would be the person that would go, they are not going down a black diamond slope at 6. It's funny, I surf, and so I just laugh because I'm an old guy, and the 6 and 7-year-olds who are now passing me like, hey,
Yeah.
old guy, get out of the way. I just laugh. They're rude, is what they are.
Yeah.
But I'm laughing because I go, they are so good. But they're gonna I just go, when are they gonna crunch into somebody on a board? But I would say that if it was something that was really affecting Cathy and me, that it would be important for Cathy and me to we're not going to be on the same page. So one of us is going to have to relinquish
Right.
that. And it's Cathy's deal would be the fear factor. And so fear is real. And so when we hear about fear, fear is self-perceived, but it could be real or not real. So I would have to deal with Cathy's fear factor more than just like putting a consequence out there or whatever. I would say that would take some work that maybe she and I would need to go to a counselor with if it was affecting our marriage. When it comes to the screen thing, I would do two things. One is same answer, but then I would also read a book, Screen Kids, some of the great books on screens, and actually develop a plan and really a contract, if you would, just on screens. And one of those would be, the behind closed door stuff. Today, Wi-Fi is awesome, but today, like you said, kids can be in so much trouble so quick.
Right.
So as parents, part of that contract would be, the door has to stay open, or you get your homework done in a different room if you have it, or there's certain times, or I get a chance to look at history. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do, of course, but I think there's some a lot of our disagreements are based on fear. So the fear is, like, I have a fear that if my kids were behind a closed door too long on screens, I don't think my kids would be looking at porn. I think, and again, they're older now, but I think they would have just been goofing off. They had homework to do and they were playing another game, or they were talking with their friends, or doing all of the same, doing homework, friends, and a game at the same time, whatever,
Right.
music playing, how they do that. I don't know.
Right.
But there is a fear factor in that, and we have to deal with that. So I think you put it down, and it's conflict can be good for a marriage. Where I feel for single parents, it's so much harder because they don't have somebody else to run through these deals. And none of us know how to parent a 24 kid when it comes to certain screen things and all this kind of stuff, because, we didn't do that. It wasn't our world. So we have to learn. So
Yeah.
it takes time.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be easy. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
kids showed up and I went, wow, this is messy. But, even spiritually speaking, God is okay with messes. So we
Yeah.
have to assume that we can't assume that life is going to be perfect within the family. We have to almost assume that it's going to be chaotic and a little messy. And God's saying, I'm okay with that. I can live with messes. I can live with your messes.
Yeah. We've tried to, I had one time my son was we walked up and it was in the second floor and he was jumping on his bed and I was about to get so mad at him for you're not supposed to jump on your bed. I mean, he's 6 years old, 5 years old. Well, he's a little boy and there's pillows everywhere and I'm like I find myself getting all worked up and I had a moment of looking at him and then I looked out at the roof right outside and I thought, okay, honestly, the fact he's jumping on a bed is not that big a deal. If
Right.
he was out jumping on the roof, that's a very big deal.
Big deal. Yeah.
And my wife and I have talked about, we've used that all the time. And I'll get
Great.
worked up about something and she'll go, is he jumping on the bed or jumping on the roof? And I always
Oh,
go, man,
hey.
I wish I'd never told you that.
But that's it. See, what
It's
you and your
helpful.
wife have done is you have words that you can kind of, Kathy and I talk in marriage. She'll go, because I'll crawl in a cave in her mind. And
Yeah.
so she'll go, you know what, honey, I think you're crawling in a cave. I can't, this is, do you honestly need to be in your cave? Well, that's a word we use, a phrase we use. It's the same with that. I mean, I can't think of a better illustration than is he jumping on the bed or is he jumping on the roof? Now, is jumping on the bed appropriate 24/7? No. And it's not at certain times. Fine. But it's not that he's going to fall off the roof and land on his head.
Right. Right. And
So it's
sometimes
great.
sometimes my discipline or my ire gets raised to the same level for everything. And
Sure.
the reality
Yeah.
is it's just not. And so I think of
No.
that when I'm thinking of like parents and how to, me and Nikki may disagree on this. Is it really a big deal? Let me let her way play out. And
Yeah.
quite often she's quite right. And I'm glad
Yeah,
that we screwed through.
exactly. And even if she was in your mind wrong,
Mhm.
it's jumping on the bed. It's not jumping on even
Right.
in marriage. I mean, it's a great phrase. Are we jumping
Oh
on the
yeah.
bed or are we jumping on the roof? And when you're
Yeah.
jumping on the roof, you got to work through the conflict. When you're just jumping on the bed, I always say, does it really matter?
Yeah.
So things in with even our kids or certain things, I kind of go, everything can't matter, or
Right.
then that's too hard. And I feel sorry for the parent who everything matters.
Yeah.
Jumping on the bed is that part of that. Then is our own. How are we doing in our own soul care? How are we doing in our own life? Because I find that I escalate if I'm too busy or if I'm too tired or if I'm too angry or I'm building up walls or whatever. And that's about me. That's not about my kids or it's not
Right.
about my wife either. Yeah.
Right. Hey, we just got a few more minutes. I'm just curious if you've got any kind of nuggets that you'd love to throw out, words of encouragement to parents, some of the maybe the bigger lessons that you've learned over how many years have you been doing this and really equipping parents and
Well,
things?
Kathy and I just celebrated 50 years of marriage, and Kathy and I got married, went on a 10-day honeymoon, and became a youth pastor. And so, and I
Wow.
used to say, people would bring their kids, drop their kids off, and then go to brunch or go to dinner or something. And I wish the kids would drop the parents off,
Yeah.
and then they could go have dinner or go do something, and then we could help the parents. So that kind of my life changed, but I still do the same stuff.
Right.
I still am thinking about how do I help kids thrive. So yeah, so it's been 50 years. Oh,
Yeah.
long
So yeah,
time.
so I'm just curious for I want to give you a big umbrella and a long
Mhm.
leash of just what are some of the maybe the key points that you'd want to
Yeah,
express to
yeah.
parents?
Well, I would say to the parents, something is better than nothing. I think we get so freaked out, especially today's parents. We're like, well, I need to read this book. I need to do this. I have to do everything. It's something is better than nothing. So,
Mhm.
major in the majors and minor in the minors, and don't hardly even, put energy into that, to be honest. And we've spent this time talking about discipline, but I think parents have to learn to understand that the primary disciplers, it's not the church, it's the home. The most important spiritual influence, so says research,
Mhm.
is mom, what kids say. So I think dads, we got to do better. I'm not throwing all dads under the bus, but I think, but moms tend to do this better, and then dads, then grandma and grandpa, then the church. Well, actually, even friends and peers are sometimes more important spiritually. So I
Mm.
think we have to, make sure that we understand that we're the primary disciplers. Discipleship means helping them grow in their faith, but it also means talking about morals and values. And
Mhm.
so I think that's where, sex education. I had a funny experience Tuesday. I was doing a marriage conference here locally at a church, and it was on intimacy, and I ended up on physical intimacy. And I said, how many of you received good, positive, healthy, value-centered sex education from your parents? I'm talking to adults.
Yeah.
One person raised their hand, and it was a pretty good sized room. And it was
Wow.
the pastor, which I never see pastors get that. I just like, well, I go, wow. an expert on sex, and they just laughed. And then I said, I think his next series is going to be sex education for adults because none of you had this.
Yeah.
But the research says that the more positive, value-centered sex education kids receive from their parents, the less confused they'll be. Hear that? Less confused and the less promiscuous. And that's secular research.
Hmm.
So as
Interesting.
parents, I think we need to have those kind of awkward conversations. I just used the illustration about sex, but it's the same with drug education. It's the same with screens. To me, screens are morals and values. So if we as parents go lazy and we allow our 2-year-old to self-soothe every time they have a fit, we put a phone in front of them. Well, we're teaching them how to self-soothe with a phone
Right.
or any kind of digital device, as opposed to kind of working through this stuff.
Yeah.
So those kinds of issues as parents, we didn't go to parenting school. So
Yeah.
it is important to, I tell parents, read a book a year, read on parenting, read a book a year on marriage if you're married. Read, specifically if you're having problems with screens, then man, buy something that can give you a foundation, because there's really great experts out there right now on all of these topics. Sex education. Start
Mhm.
at age 3 to 5 and say, God made your body and God made boys and God made girls, because then you're going to be the safest person when they get to be 10 and boys see pornography or girls see pornography at age 11.8. You're going to be safer than if you started young. And so, again, I think we have to rethink our job description. And then the last thing I would say on that, Jim, is that make sure that we're parenting in stages. So the first
Yes.
stage we call is catering. And catering is, 0 to 2, and all you're doing is loving on your kids, changing their diapers, feeding them, taking care of them. I mean, you can't discipline them. You really can't train them much. Parents will go, my kid is out of control at 1. Well, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with that. You change their diaper more and see if they have a diaper rash. But
Mhm.
again, you don't do that. At 2 to 10, you're in control. And that's a great job for those of us who are control freaks. But then we have to move them, since our goal is to be responsible adults, that say at 10 to, like, say, I'd say even up to like 15, you're coaching them. Coaches are in control. Coaches lead, but they also let the kids make some of their own mistakes, and they take them out. Take them out and put them on the bench. They'll bench them for, poor behavior or whatever. But the point being is that they're beginning to make some of their decisions. Once your kids are 15 on up to what we call latent adolescence or emerging adulthood, I mean, in some ways, what you're doing is consulting. Most of their day-to-day decisions should be done on their own, even if they're kind of goofy. Now, why are we doing that? Because we want that adult relationship to be the carrying stage where you make the transition from, um, being in semi-control anyway to really you're now a mentor to them.
Mhm.
And we find that the 20s are tough. I wrote a book called Doing Life with Your Adult Children, Keep Your Mouth Shut to Welcome That Out, which pretty much describes that book and what to do. But we found that the 20s was really tough because they were what we call, it's a new word phrase over the years called emerging adulthood, and that's where they're experimenting with behavior. That's where they're straying from faith and whatnot. By the time they get in their 30s, they kind of settle it down a little bit
Mhm.
most of the time. So you want to look at each of those stages and parent within those stages, because each stage is different. And parent meaning talk to them about sex at a different stage. Deal
Mhm.
with spiritual things at a different stage. We had family. We called it family devotion until the kids went, we hate family devotions, because dad was leading it. So mom started leading it, called family time, and they loved it. Chocolate and licorice also were a part of that one. But we did things where, as they got older, we actually are fortunate enough to have a pool and a spa, and so we would do family devotions in the pool, and we would do things like, um, give a case study talking about a non-Christian dating a Christian kid. What did they think? And we actually had Bible study on that in the spa, where when they were younger, we did stories and we did plays. But my teenagers were like, "We are not doing a play. I'm sorry, you're out of
Yeah.
this." I get it. So
Yeah.
again, even the spiritual stuff, we focus on what's age development appropriate.
Mhm.
And just in closing on your question, is Cathy and I, every 6 months, we're right. The studio is in Dana Point, California, so we live in Dana Point. There's a great beach, so we would go to the beach every 6 months, and we'd take like a yellow notepad and we'd write spiritual, sex education, discipline, and we'd kind of write each kid what we wanted to see what we
Mm.
wanted to experience with them over a 6 month period. We didn't always follow it, but we'd be watching a movie and we go, oh, we want to talk to them about this situation.
Yeah.
And Cathy would look at me and like, put it on pause, dude. Because we had just seen,
Yeah.
like, we were watching something and two girls kissed. And my
Mhm.
girls are even going, yuck, right? But
Mhm.
we were going to talk about that. And we never really had much of a conversation with it. So she looked at me and I went, oh, great. So I put the pause and I go, hey, so what do you guys think about what just happened? And you know what? We had a really good conversation. Other times I would say, I would be ready for the conversation. What do you think about this? And they go, Dad, take it off a pause. We want to see what's going to go
Yeah.
on. They wouldn't want to talk. See,
Yeah.
so it doesn't always work, but that being proactive, we liked it. We sat at the beach. We sat on a beach
Yeah.
chair, even if it was cold, and we'd have our sweats on, and we'd sit on the sand, and we'd kind of create this thing. And then, we never told our girls we did that.
Hmm.
Well, I was just telling
Yeah.
Christy, who now has a 9 and a 6-year-old, that what we did. And she goes, "That's a great idea. I had no idea you guys did that." I go, "Yeah. Remember the time we had to talk about this?" And she goes, "That was from that note." I go, "Oh, you are so right." I go,
Yeah.
I." She goes, when you talked about sex, Dad, you could do that in front of so many people, but with us, you just stuttered and your head, would sweat, your ears turned red. You
Mhm.
know, you were so awkward." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Wait, this is what I
Thanks,
do."
honey.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah. That's
loved
great.
it. Yeah,
That's great. We I love what you said, catering, control, coaching, consultant.
consulting.
And then I heard caring. I don't know if you meant to add another
Caring.
C in
No,
there or not,
no,
but
I did. I was sounding like, some pastors who do the, I don't know if you do that, Jim, but,
I don't do
so
alliteration well.
yeah. So the years ago, that was like, we had some of the mega church pastors all did that.
Oh
And
yeah.
and I never knew if I really loved that or if I thought that was like goofy, but then I go, wait, that kind of fits. I remember I was just writing this stuff out
Yeah.
when I was writing it. It's in a book called Confident Parenting. And I was writing this and I kind of went, man, that's good. Because I could never do that. I would want to, as a speaker, preacher, I would want to do some of those alliterations and I could never figure it out. And I've got a friend who I write with sometimes named Doug Fields, and he's so good at that. And I go, how do you come up with these words? But yeah,
Yeah.
that's not me.
That's funny. Hey, what the website is what?
HomeWord.com. HOMEWORD
Yeah,
dot com.
let me just commend to people. We read you have some different books about talking to your kids about their bodies and sex, and it's
Yeah.
really it kind of models that it does it in stages.
Yeah.
So it's not like all of a sudden they're 16 and you go, okay, well let's sit down. Well, 16 is too late, but let's sit down and have the whole big conversation. Like it really
Yeah.
stages through it. And I just say to people listening here today, there's lots of great resources there, and so
Yeah.
I'd commend you to go
Sure.
check that out.
No, that's all right.
And Jim, I'm incredibly grateful for your time today. Thanks
Yeah,
very
I
much.
love it. I love what you're doing. And I love that
Thanks.
you were in a series recently called Family Matters, because that's all of us in church. When I go to church, I'm coming from a family. I'm thinking about how it relates to my family. And so, that's an important thing for
Yeah,
churches. The good churches in America today are making sure that families are being taken care of, at least by giving them good content and experiences. And the churches that are doing it like yours, where there's authenticity, it's great. It's awesome.
great. Thanks for your help. Thanks for adding to this today. I'm
Sure.
excited to get this out and get this into the parents' hands.
Yay. Good job.
Will
Okay.
impact
God
the next
bless.
generation.
Okay.
Thanks so
And
much.
yes, you got it. Okay. Take care.
Have a great day.
Yeah.